Hello, I'm Eric Lee, Director of the Kimball Art Museum. Thank you for coming this morning to our inaugural panel discussion for the spectacular exhibition, Dutch Art in a Global Age, Masterpieces from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. It has been such a pleasure working on this show with the MFA Boston, and I'm so grateful to the museum for sharing its treasures with the Kimball. Many thanks go to the MFA's director, Matthew Teitelbaum, as well as Frederick Elchman, Chair of the Art of Europe, Christopher Atkins, the Van Otterloo Weatherbie Director of the MFA's Center for Netherlandish Art, Antien Knop, the MFA's Assistant Curator of the Art of Europe, and Rona Macbeth, the MFA's Director of Conservation and Scientific Research, who is also the Eijk and Rosemarie Van Otterloo Conservator of Paintings. Now, you've heard me already say the names Van Otterloo and Weatherbie twice, and that's because Rosemarie and Eijk Van Otterloo and Susan and Matthew Weatherbie are major transformative figures in the history of the MFA Boston, having made extraordinary contributions to the study of Dutch art at the MFA, and indeed to the study of Dutch art in general. We will shortly hear more about these two visionary couples and even hear directly from Eijk and Matthew. But meanwhile, I want to thank them for so generously sharing their collections with the Kimball. The Kimball's Deputy Director, George Shackelford, who was the MFA Boston's Chair of the Art of Europe for 16 years before coming to the Kimball 13 years ago, served as organizing curator of the exhibition. He is this morning's moderator and will be introducing each of the speakers. Thank you, George, for your brilliant work on this show, and thank you to the Kimball's entire passionate and dedicated staff, which helped realize the exhibition. On behalf of the entire Kimball staff, I want to express my deep gratitude to Kay Fortson, Kimball Wynn, and the entire board of directors of the Kimball Art Foundation for enabling the Kimball to bring exhibitions like Dutch Art in a Global Age to the Kimball Art Museum, and for ensuring that the museum is as great as it can be. And now, George Shackelford. George.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and thank you all for being here this morning. It's really a great pleasure to see so many people turning out for a panel on Dutch art of the 17th century. A fascinating subject, and those of you who've had the chance to be in the exhibition upstairs will realize that there is so much to see in this show. I would like to extend my thanks in particular to my colleague Rebecca Goss, who so ably helped us, me and Nancy Edwards, the curator of European art and head of academic services, in organizing this panel discussion this morning, making sure that everybody got here on time, got a hotel room, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really great working with these two people to make this thing happen. I'm going to introduce everybody sort of in turn as they begin to speak, but I wanted to take you back to when I was this is me, when I was interviewing for a job at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I was a curator at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and I had been invited to come up and interview for a job at the MFA Boston. And I was going through the galleries, and I was struck, you know, curators go through the galleries and read wall labels looking for dates of acquisition and to see who bought what when, and so I was going through and I was looking at this amazing pair of Rembrandts with the date 93.1474 on them, and I thought, wow, Peter Sutton, who was the man who had retired and or gone on to work at Christie's, and I was going to be his replacement. I thought, wow, what an amazing thing in 1993 to be able to get Mrs. Frederick Ames. I wonder if I get to meet her. What an amazing thing to be able to get Mrs. Frederick Ames to give you a pair of Rembrandt portraits in 1993. Well, of course, it was given in 1893. not 1993. And this kid from Texas was thinking, oh, well, now I need to have a paradigm shift here and think of what is going to happen. And in fact, in the MFA collection, there are still many, many paintings that were on view in the building in 1900 when the photograph that you see as the background here was taken. And at that time, these two galleries were next to each other. The gallery for Dutch art, Old Masters, there was Italian and Dutch in the same room, is at the left, and the gallery for American Old Masters, remember this photograph is taken in 1900, so some of these things are, really less than 100 years old, but the American Old Masters featuring the matching pair of ovals, the Rembrandt portraits of a man and his wife on the left, and George and Martha Washington, then owned by the Boston Athenaeum and now owned jointly by the MFA Boston and the National Portrait Gallery in Washington. They were side by side in the galleries. Nearby was a gallery of modern art, and American art is behind us as we are looking into this room, and French art is in front of us, and we see there the giant painting recently acquired by Henri Regnault of Automaton with the Horses of Achilles at the center, which my colleague and friend Rona Macbeth, seating to the right of the stage, spent about a year and a half restoring after I got to the museum. But also in this painting are the first three paintings by Monet to enter the MFA Boston's collection. The first three of what would be 40 paintings by Monet to enter the museum's collection. This slide is in here in this talk on Dutch art to tell you something about what happened to the MFA collection in the first part of the 20th century, which is to say that the French collection, because of the habits of Boston collectors, grew by leaps and bounds. And that was became one of the great strengths of the MFA's collections, where up until recently, about half of the European paintings were made in France. Nonetheless, there was always a great fondness and seriousness of purpose around the study of Dutch art in Boston, from the time of John Walsh to Peter Sutton to Cliff Ackley, who only recently retired, to Ronnie Baer, who's now at Princeton. And these scholars produced an incredible variety of publications on the history of Dutch painting from the 1980s and 90s all the way to the very present day. But things changed. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, two couples began to collect Dutch art in great depth and with great seriousness. And in 2017, these two couples, you will recognize Eijk and Matt at either end of our stage here today, became the donors who transformed the MFA's collection and gave Dutch art at the left the same volume and seriousness of purpose in the MFA's collection that the French collection had up until that time had. So now you see a gallery of Dutch art at the left here, and Dutch and Flemish art, and a gallery of French art at the other side. And these two are at either end of the beautiful suite of galleries in the Evans wing of the MFA, and which all of our MFA colleagues will invite you to go and visit. So I'm going to pass the baton to Antien Knaap, who is assistant curator of European paintings at the MFA Boston, and is one of the people who devised this exhibition, Dutch Art in a Global Age, and who is going to speak to you about the exhibition itself. So, Antien.
Yes, good morning. So thank you for that introduction, George, and thank you all here at the Kimball for your very warm welcome. We've just had a fantastic time. So on behalf of Frederick Ilchman, Chair of Art of Europe and Exhibition Co-Curator, it is my pleasure to introduce Dutch Art in a Global Age. The exhibition celebrates the promised gift of 114 Dutch and Flemish paintings to the MFA from Rosemary and Eijk van Otterloo and Susan and Matthew Weatherbie. This extraordinary gift elevated our collection of paintings in this area to among the best in the world. In 2021, we reopened with a new installation of the 3 combined collections. On your screen, you see our main gallery in the Evans Wing, showcasing a Dutch East India ship model alongside many Dutch and Flemish highlights, primarily portraits, history paintings, and genre paintings. Now, on the back wall, you see another set of large Rembrandt portraits from the MFA's historical collection, along the Frans Hals portrait from the Weatherbie collection. In a gallery called Global Commerce, we focused on the Dutch role in international trade to examine the historical context in which these works were created. With the expansion of our collections and the founding of the Center for Netherlandish Art, about which Chris will tell you more later on, it has become one of the museum's goals to travel the collection and share our treasures with broader audiences beyond the MFA. Now, when we were thinking of an exhibition, we felt that the success of the global installation at home would be a good topic to expand upon. I should stress that this has been a team effort. In addition to working with Frederik Iltschman and CNA Director Chris Atkins and Head of Painting Conservation Rona Macbeth, we also collaborated with the curators in Prince and Decorative Arts in Boston, Ben Weiss and Courtney Harris. To our very good fortune, we were able to partner with the Kimball and work with George Shackelford and your wonderful staff here in Fort Worth. Now, an exhibition of this scale, featuring 125 objects, including 17 paintings, while still having high-quality displays in Boston, has only been possible thanks to the Van Otterloo and Weatherbie transformative gift. So in what follows, I will give a quick overview of the sections of the exhibition. So key to the concept of the show is a modern map highlighting Dutch trade routes in the early modern period that stretched from Europe to Asia, Africa, and the Americas, which we developed in collaboration with Dutch historian Pepijn Brandon from Amsterdam. So displayed at the entrance of the exhibition, it showed what flowed into the Netherlands, especially porcelain from China, tobacco and sugar from the Americas. But we also highlight what went out. The Chinese, from their side, were interested in silver. So to obtain Asian products, the Dutch did not sell local goods like cheese. No, they sold silver bars and coins mined in the Americas, meaning that they were intermediaries between East and West. So you can see, I'm going to try out my, my highlight. So here you can see that Virginia, of course, and New York, but also Brazil was for a while in a Dutch trading post, and how both East and West are connected through trade. In the first section, the exhibition is divided into 7 sections. In the first section, entitled, well, here they are, I realize. In the first section, entitled The World at Home, we use our magnificent collection of still life paintings as a hook. A highlight is Willem Klaas Heda's painting that displays his great skill in rendering the knobby rind and spiral shape of the lemon peel. But what we also want to draw attention to is the fact that in this intimate setting, we see local beer and pewter next to lemons from the Mediterranean and silver and tobacco from the Americas. Also included is an actual taza, or drinking vessel, to give visitors a sense of the material splendor of such objects. Willem Kalf's still life likewise speaks to the reaches of global trade. He uses light and tilts the porcelain bowl, a product imported from China. An actual porcelain plate nearby will allow visitors to compare the two. In addition to commodities that were very profitable, like porcelain and tobacco, the Dutch also imported foreign specimens. This wonderful still life by Hendrik de Fromantieu features not only a tulip, which was imported from Turkey and cultivated in Dutch botanical gardens, but it also includes a most unusual new arrival from the Americas, a passion flower from Brazil in the lower left corner. I also want to draw your attention to the beautiful Mormont fritillaria, seen in profile, a rare butterfly that originated in North America. And I really invite you to look for butterflies in this exhibition. There's a lot of red admirals that were European ones, but there was this real interest in imported ones as well. So after zooming into these details, we want to ask the question, what is the background in which these works were created? So the second section is entitled The World Beyond. We evoke a time of dramatic change when the Netherlands emerged as a global superpower. The section begins with 4 impressive seascapes. Bonaventura Peters is an early work in the colorful and detailed style that shows Dutch ships in the harbor of Antwerp. This is an outstanding seascape by Willem van de Velde, which combines domestic merchant ships with oceanic sailing vessels that made overseas trade possible. The inclusion of prints depicting long-distance ships will introduce visitors to the Dutch East and West India Companies, which were the first multinational corporations that managed overseas trade. And you can see at the top, it says, it identifies it as a Dutch East India ship. This section also addresses the darker history of global commerce, showing that the Dutch trading companies relied on enslaved labor to produce lucrative commodities such as sugar, spices, and tobacco. The third section, Amsterdam as a cosmopolitan hub, explores the role of the city as a thriving port where goods from around the world were traded and stockpiled. We opened this section with Ludolf Bakhuysen's depiction of Amsterdam's bustling harbor, which is the banner of the show. This spectacular painting by Jan van der Heijden focuses on the Amsterdam's houses on the newly constructed canal rings that were built for the new mercantile elite who benefited from the explosion in global trade. In the next section, entitled The World of Faith, we focus on the religious climate in the Netherlands. The Dutch Republic broke away from Catholic rule and Protestantism became the dominant religion. But they also followed the idea of freedom of conscience, which meant that you could believe whatever you wanted as long as you did it at home. So it's called compromise. As a result of this policy, the Dutch Republic harbored many religious communities, including Catholic minorities, but also Jewish people who escaped prosecution in other parts of Europe. This section features de Kimbell's wonderful portrait of a Jewish sitter by Rembrandt and the 2 silver Torah finials made in Rotterdam that are used to decorate the top of the Torah scrolls, the central text of Judaism. In the 4th section, called Global Citizens, we ask, who were the Dutch? We are very proud to present a beautiful early portrait by Frans Hals of a woman with arm akimbo, very confident, that has recently been identified as Cunera van Baarsdorp, the daughter of the mayor of Leiden and wife of a wealthy beer brewer from Haarlem. Another highlight is Rembrandt's Aaltje Uilenburg, the crown jewel of the Van Otterloo collection. She is the wife of a Calvinist preacher and the cousin of Rembrandt's employer. We see humility, but also reference to wealth and trade, as seen in her jacket, lined with fur that was imported from Dutch colonies in the Americas. The next section, called Celebrating the Familiar, shows that at the same time as the Dutch embraced global exploration, they also returned to the local and the everyday. This beautiful work by Jacob van Ruisdael shows the low-lying countryside near Alkmaar, the dramatic sky, which takes up 3/4 of the picture space, and the alternating bands of light and shadow add visual interest to the landscape. The exhibition also showcases remarkable Rembrandt prints, including landscapes like this one, as Rembrandt made numerous sketches in the environs of Amsterdam. Notice on the right the fisherman carrying buckets of fish with a dog by his side. Now in the title you see he's called Milkman, but they've concluded that he's not carrying milk with fish. Okay, so, but what I love about it is that little dog, and also in the distance is the harbor, but he really foregrounds the countryside, a more sort of nostalgic vision. Paintings and prints of domestic animals, including Gerrit Douw's endearing dog that is based on a Rembrandt plinth of the same subject, complete this salute to the familiar. So we began by examining the domestic intimacy of the Dutch still life. In the last section, called Conspicuous Consumption, we focus on genre paintings and portraits that incorporate many of the new products and luxuries that were introduced in the first section. Global commodities are present, for example, in Nicolaas Maas's genre painting here on your screen. We're drawn into the picture by the conspiratorial gesture of the woman who picks the man's pocket. But Maas also includes tobacco implements on the table, arranged in the form of a tobacco still life painting, the source of his slumber. So to conclude, the exhibition will celebrate the beauty of these great masterpieces and the richness of the artistic production, from paintings and prints to decorative arts. It will also encourage visitors to consider the historical context in which these works were created, offering a broader and more complete history of the art of this era and reflecting the CNA's focus on interdisciplinary research. Thank you.
Thank you, Antine. Antine is passing the all-important clicker to Eijk van Otterloo, whose name, along with that of Matthew Weatherbie, you've heard many times. We are so pleased to have Eijk and Rosemarie van Otterloo and Matthew and Susan Weatherbie with us today, and in fact, over this course of this weekend here in Fort Worth. It's been really great to have these old friends from my days in Boston here in my hometown, to share with them the glories of the Kimball Art Museum and the glories of Fort Worth, as they have shared with us the glories of their collections and of the MFA Boston. I've invited Eijk and Matt to speak about aspects of their role as collectors, and I can't stress enough. Eijk, move the thing forward one so you see other way. There you go, your name. They will be speaking about their role as collectors and the exciting, the thrill of the chase, shall we say, as they have assembled their wonderful collections, and then the extraordinary rewards of being the great philanthropists that they are. So welcome Eijk van Otterloo, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stand up so that I can walk around, and because the screen is rather big, and sometimes I want to look at something at the right, and sometimes I want to point at something on the left. Collecting is, I assure you, an awful lot of fun. And we have had wonderful experiences over the years, and of course one of the greatest experiences right now is being here for the first time for us, being in Fort Worth and seeing the Kimball Museum that has had so much fame over the years, but I had never visited And yesterday I spent a lot of time in the museum, and I was blown away. It was just a really, really fabulous museum, and you're so lucky to have it and to live here. In the show are two paintings hanging side by side that they seem to be painted by the same artist, but they're not. The one on the left is by Peter Klaas, and the one on the right is by Willem Klaas Heda. These two fellows were born within 2 years of each other in 1994 and 1996. Sorry, 16. Just subtract 300 years from whatever I'm talking about. And but they were not, and they worked for a long time in the town of Haarlem, or the city of Haarlem, and they obviously seem to have become competitors of each other, and that's if you look carefully at this painting, you see that it's almost like they borrowed objects from each other. And they're fairly identical. Now, you're forgiven to think, if you see these paintings, that they have been painted by the same person. And there is a trick to knowing who's who. If you look at the painting on the right, there is a lemon or an orange, half peeled, and this is how you know that a Heda is painted by a left-handed person. And you often see Peter Klaas also with a lemon or an orange, and obviously is a right-handed person. Try to hold a lemon this way and peel it. If you're a righty, you can't do it. It's an impossibility. So take a good look at the paintings in the show. This painting is Adriaan Korte. It's a relatively small painting. As you can see, it's about 7 inches by 9. It's painted on board by Adriaan Korte, who has a relatively small oeuvre. For many years, he was not known at all to anyone. He was relatively recently rediscovered. This painting came with a really bad frame, and a bad frame can destroy the beauty of a great painting. So it was suggested to us that we change the frame and get a period frame. So we managed to get a period frame. Cost us about 6,000 euros, and the frame was in my baggage coming back from Europe. I came to the customs. I had identified on the sheet that we had this frame, $6,000, and naturally the customs people picked us out of the line and said, "We want to see this frame." And we opened up the frame, unwrapped it, and here was this frame, black, lots of holes from worms, scratches. It looked like a piece of crap, really. And so they asked, "You paid $6,000 for this?" I said, "Yes, it's from the 17th century. It's very old, and of course you can see how old it is thanks to the worms that have lived in it." And they said, "This can't be right." So they examined this frame backwards and forwards. They were looking for false compartments. They ran it through the X-ray, couldn't find anything, and they finally said, "Well, must have been a good purchase." And we were on our way. This painting was in the was sold through auction at Christie's in New York, and in the Christie sends catalogs to their customers that they are cultivating, and we got a catalog, and it showed this Van Goyen painting, winter scene. I loved it, and so I went to New York and went to the preview to look at it. Lo and behold, when I saw this painting in the showrooms of Christie's, it had two big slices across the painting, from the top to the bottom, done with a knife by someone who was visiting the Christie's, and the public can just walk in and out. And so he was, so the painting looked like it had been destroyed. Nonetheless, it was not withdrawn, and while I was looking at it, and I thought, well, that's going to be history then. Someone tapped on my shoulder. His name is Van Dam, and he said, well, I'm a conservator and I can fix this. So maybe you should go ahead, if you really like this painting, buy it anyway. Maybe the price will be low because of the slices, but I can fix this. And I checked him out, and he was known as a very good conservator. And I ended up buying this painting for indeed a much higher price than I expected, but somewhat depressed below the estimated price range by Christie's. So to this day, I'm very happy to have this painting. Of course, now it's the MFA's painting, but he did really fix this. And I'm inviting you to take a really close look at the painting and tell me where the slices were. It's virtually impossible to find. This is another painting by the same artist, Jan van Goyen. Very different in style. Jan van Goyen, before 1637, painted in one style, and then because of his participation in the tulip bulb mania, he lost his accumulated assets, and he was depressed for a while, didn't paint for a few years, and then as he came out of that depressed period he had completely changed his style, and as you can see here. This painting I pretty much hand carried. I had it packaged, but I took it on the plane on the assumption that we probably would find a spot where we could put it. I couldn't go in the overhead. I was not going to check it, of course. So I asked the pilots if they could store it in the cockpit, and they did. I wrote on the. Those were still the days that you had to write, make a listing of everything you had bought abroad, so that the customs people could check you. And I put on the slip of paper that we had this Van Goyen purchased for $500,000. Now, the customs people do not often see slips of paper with that kind of a number, so they first assumed that the decimal point was in the wrong place. Unfortunately, one of them also said, well, we want to take a look at this Van Goyen. And so we were taken out of the line. We had to unwrap the painting, showed it to them. They said, "But this," and then more customs people came around to examine this thing, and they finally said, "Well, boy, I've always wanted to see a Van Gogh." Next, Antien briefly spoke about this painting, the Westerchurch in Amsterdam. And the Westerchurch is still there, just like you see now. The building in front of it, however, which was a beautiful building, is no longer there. In 1886, it was sold at auction to a builder who needed the bricks. Can you imagine? This I'm having this. I want you to see this detail of the top of the church. A few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, it was in the whole church was in stages, and what I noticed at the time was that the crown on top of the tower, the color scheme was different. There, what looks like blue there was then yellow. Red is still in the red was now the ball on the top, and yellow was inside the shell. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity to point out to the town fathers that with all the staging, they have an opportunity to bring the color scheme back to where it should have been. And indeed, they did change it back to the way Jan van der Heyden saw it. Of course, being when the staging came down, Amsterdam citizens complained that they had put the wrong colors. They had never seen that scheme, but now it's correct. This is the last painting I will be talking about. This is the Eijk. This was actually one of the earliest paintings that we came across at the TEFAF fair, which is held every year in Maastricht. And this is an artist of which there's only a very small oeuvre known, because most of his paintings were painted in the Far East or in India, and it is believed that most of his paintings were lost at sea. But this painting is truly an amazing, fine painting. This is called the Barber Surgeon, and if you look at the surgeon, the barber surgeon, he's on his knees, and you don't see his face, but you do see that he is extremely well dressed, and he's tending to probably a farmer who is intending to go, who will pay for the service of the surgeon, barber surgeon, with a rooster, kind of the way barter trade works. That this barber surgeon was well-to-do is obvious if you look at all the details of this painting. If you look at the table, the globe, on top of it the violin, he plays the violin, and the book is open to a chapter that says Maurits van Nassau. Of course, Maurits van Nassau was part of the then ruling family in the Netherlands, and so he shows thereby his allegiance to this family. We found the book a few years ago, and we can open the book exactly to the same page. It was not in this show, however. Finally, what I want to point out is the bird cage. The bird cage is open, so the bird is said to have flown the coop. It is said to be symbolic for the loss of either his or her virginity. Now, that this is suggested in this painting is emphasized. If you go through the window, you see the detail of this couple on the bridge pointing to a stork on top of that building. So perhaps there's some truth to the symbolism of the birdcage with the open. Thank you very much.
We'll pass the clicker off to Matt Weatherbie. I have to say, it was, Eijk mentioned TEFAF, which is the European Fine Art Fair. And I have spent so many happy times at TEFAF with Rosemarie and Eijk and with Matt and Susan, looking at paintings that they were considering purchasing, many of which are in this exhibition. And it was those fun times I will never forget. And I'll particularly never forget the first time I ever went to TEFAF in the company of Eijk and Rosemarie. We were caught in Boston in a snowstorm, hours and hours and hours late in departure, and we never knew whether we were actually going to take off. And then Eijk renting a car at the Brussels airport and driving us off to TEFAF. It was a great bonding moment, and then similar moments with Matt and Susan at their beautiful house in Boston, and very good food at that table to be remembered with great pleasure. So Matt Weatherbie, if you'll advance the slide, you'll actually see your name, and then. Let's see, it should. Rona's an expert with this kind of thing. There we go. Is it not doing it? There you go. And there are the paintings. So, Matthew Weatherbie.
Thank you, George. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Let me just advance it one. Could you advance it one more? Thank you, Rona. I have one slide, and this is it. And and what I thought I would do is just to relate how Susan and I have gone about forming our collection. People ask this from time to time, so I wanted to give you some of the guiding principles that we have followed in building our collection over 40 years. The first and perhaps very obvious thing is, do we love the image? Does it compel us to look at it? Do we want to live with it? Is it something we can learn from? And in our collecting, we've always done it together, and we've always agreed that this is a painting we wish to pursue because it, as the French say, has the coup de foudre. The heart is struck by the appeal of the painting. It draws you to it, and that's always been a very important guiding principle. A second guiding principle, again, it may be obvious, but is it indisputably authentic? Remember, these are objects that are supposed to be 350 to 400 years old. There were fakes, there were copies, there were contemporary copies done in the 17th century. There were later copies done, and it's a tricky field. And we've had to be careful, as one expert has said. You have to be very, very careful in trying to make sure that you acquire things that are indisputably authentic. A third guiding principle that Eijk alluded to, but has been very important to us, is the physical condition of the painting acceptably excellent? Again, these things have been, they've passed through several hands in many instances over 350 or 400 years. They've been restored. Restoration techniques, for example, in the 19th century, were harsh in many instances and not as sophisticated or as forgiving as in the 20th century. So we've had a high bar in terms of physical condition, and have had to pass on a number of paintings over the years where we determined that, with the help of conservators, that the physical condition of the painting was just substandard. And the reason that's important is paintings lose their luster, their glow, their sheen, because of, varnish has been removed that should have been on the painting, things like that. So again, that's been a very important principle that we've adhered to. Another principle, and I think those dealers in the audience might nod in agreement, is we've been patient but persistent, and sometimes patient to the point of exasperating people who would wish to sell us a picture. We've taken our time, and yet we've been persistent, and I will refer to these two paintings after I run through these principles to elaborate on that. But it's a game where we've learned to be patient and persistent. Another principle is, and it's one of the wonderful things about this hobby, is that there's a wide network, wide geographically, not so wide in terms of numbers, but people from Europe and America in particular who are curators, scholars, dealers, but who have a vast knowledge of either individual artists or of this art in general. And so we've always sought to reach out broadly to people, and people have been uniformly welcoming and helpful in giving us information. So between those sources of providing textual information, if you will, and the practice of looking and looking and looking at paintings so that you can determine whether this Frans Hals is a terrific example of Frans Hals, and this Adrian van de Velde is a wonderful example of Adrian van de Velde. You have to train your eye, and whether it's looking through catalogs or catalog raisonnés of individual artists, museum catalogs, exhibition catalogs, or just going to museums and private collections and looking at the art, we found that that's helped us sharpen our eye and improve our connoisseurship, if you will. One other principle is to have a sense of market values, financial values. And you have to, because we are talking about a lot of money in collecting at this level. But to recognize that sometimes you just have to swallow hard and pay up for quality, because as the saying goes, the quality remains. The thrill of the quality remains long after the pain of the payment is and that's been, excuse me, that's been a guiding principle for us. So, with that, let me just turn briefly to the two paintings. On the left is Cunera van Beerstorp, around 1625, at the height of Frans Hals's long, illustrious, remarkable career. We first became aware of this painting in, so long ago I can't remember exactly. It was 1994. We saw a photograph of it at the TAFAF show in Maastricht, and the dealer said, he showed us a photograph. He said, "This isn't available yet. It's in a private collection, but it will be available at some point in time." Well, we waited for 15 years, and in 1999, got a call and through an intermediary managed to acquire the painting from a prestigious private English collection, the collection of Lady Mountbatten of Burma. And the painting was considered so important that the British government temporarily blocked the export of the painting. There's a so-called Weatherbie commission they have in England to try and keep as many important works of art in the country as possible. And what that means is a museum would have a certain amount of time, typically 3 months, to raise the funds to match what we were paying for the painting. And so we had to, through our advisor, we had to present our case why the Hals should leave England, and arguing on behalf of the UK was the director of the National Gallery in London. So it was a tense situation, but our guy prevailed, and the export license was granted, and here she is for all of us to enjoy in Fort Worth. If we can turn to the Adrian van de Velde. Adrian van de Velde is not as well known, obviously, as Frans Hals. He lived only 36 years, and this painting was painted when he was a mere 20 years old. This painting, again, I talked about patience and persistence. There's a famous book on Dutch landscapes that came out in the 1960s by a renowned scholar named landscape painting of the 17th century by Stekhoff, Professor Willem Stekhoff. And the book is not in color, but there was a black and white small photograph of this painting in that 1966 book, and it was described as location unknown. The painting became available, so that was we read the Stekhoff book when we started collecting in the 1980s. So 30 years later, this painting miraculously came up for auction at Christie's in London, and through a dealer friend, we were able to acquire it. And we think it's a terrific example of this relatively unknown master, painted when he was 20 years old. And it's a view out to sea. It's thought to be Scheveningen on the north coast of Netherlands. And if you look at the composition of the painting, the V format, the detail, the North Sea, we think it anticipates 19th century artists like Boudin by 200 years. It's so fresh and forward-thinking and appealing. So again, in the case of the Hals, it was 15 years. In the case of the Adrian van de Velde, it was 30 years. But patience and persistence paid off. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Rona, advance to your name. I was mentioned earlier, when I came to the Museum of Fine Arts in 1996, there was actually in 1995, when I was interviewing, they said, well, is there anything you'd like to see? And I said, well, I'd really like to see Henri Regnault's Automaton with the Horses of Achilles. And I was told by the people who were interviewing, well, actually, it's going to be pretty hard to see that now because it's face down in the conservation studio being relined by a young conservator who's come to work with us a few years ago. And I did go up to the conservation studio, and in fact, all you could see was the back of the painting, which is way bigger than this stage here. And there was a kind of a bridge across it so that the young conservator could sort of kneel on the bridge and adhere the lining canvas to the back of the original. And it had unfortunately suffered a tear. And then the question was, it was stabilized. What will we do with it now? And I said, well, I think we should restore this painting. And you saw it in the antique photograph of the galleries in 1900, and you would see it now in the galleries if you went to visit the collection in Boston today. And it was a hard restoration because it had been massively repainted within a few years of its actual creation. Whenever there was it was sent on the road as a traveling show. And whenever there was a little nick, somebody would just slather some paint on top of it. So poor Rona had to spend about a year and a half, I think, in many cases removing the unwanted overpaint, tiny fleck by tiny fleck. And I'm not talking a little fleck, I'm talking about a minuscule fleck, bit by bit by bit, and did a fantastic job. And if you go see it in the galleries, you'll see it. So again, an acquaintance, a friend of long standing, shall we say. We don't use the word old anymore. But a friend of very long standing, Rona Macbeth, who will talk to you about taking care of this wonderful collection at the MFA Boston.
Thank you, George, for that. And one thing I should say is that that painting that George was just talking about, when I came to the museum, it was an example of an artwork that would never grace the galleries. And he really championed it, and it has been on display since the conservation was completed, and it is actually one of the perennial favorites of the museum. So there are fashions in museums just as there are in everything else in the world, and it continues to change. I am going to take just a few moments of your time to introduce conservation at the MFA, and then talk a little bit about the care of particularly the Dutch collections, and particularly as they have, thanks to the generosity of the donors that you have met today, pretty much doubled in size in the last few years. Just to introduce conservation to you, we are an encyclopedic museum with over 500,000 objects. So it takes a team. It's a great deal of resources to care for a collection of that size. And we also have a great deal of support from the museum. We just opened a couple of years ago, in the middle of COVID, in fact, a beautiful new facility spread over two floors, what we call our new conservation center, with beautiful new labs. And in the images that you see there on the left, you see the fourth floor of the conservation center. You're standing in the objects lab looking towards paintings conservation, and on the right you see the Rosemary and Eijk van Otterloo Conservation Studio, just as it was when it first opened. But I also wanted to point out that there are actually 6 different disciplines of conservation in Boston because of the size of the collections, and also a scientific research lab. So about 40 staff members in all, and that includes not only conservators, scientists, and collection care specialists, but also a number of interns and fellows, because we have a strong commitment to training the next generation of conservators as well. It's really important for the care of the collection that we can leave these amazing works of art in good hands. On the lower floor of the Conservation Center, we also have a public access lobby. So if you come to the museum, and I hope you will, you can come to conservation and actually observe some of conservation in action, what's going on in some of the labs. And also, very importantly, we provide a lot of programming. It's very important for us that our visitors actually understand and are brought into the care of the collection and the appreciation of the collection. And one avenue for doing that is to actually allow people to have the intimate experiences with artworks. And what we find is people are incredibly interested and grateful for the opportunities, and particularly for the opportunity to actually get close to the artwork in the company of a conservator or a curator and actually have those conversations and feel some connection to, in a very intimate and personal way, to the artwork. Now to turn to Dutch art in Boston. I just thought George already mentioned the Ames portraits, which came in 1893 as a gift. The other Rembrandts in the collection were given throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century now. Our wonderful artist in the studio, which is up in your galleries as we speak. One of the most important small paintings in the world, I would say. And we'll talk a little bit more about it shortly. And then in the 50s, we acquired a remarkable pair of portraits, the Ellison portraits, which are rare full-length works by Rembrandt. And then most recently, we are very lucky to be receiving, as part of the promised gift from Rosemary and Eijk van Otterloo, the wonderful portrait of Eijk. I'm not going to pronounce the second name in the company of Dutch speakers because I'm going to get it wrong. Even with my Scottish accent, I can't get the sounds quite right. But it is an extraordinary portrait, and it, as you can perhaps see, Boston is very rich in early Rembrandt. These span from Rembrandt, the artist in his studio, when he's still in Leiden in 28-29, into his early Amsterdam period. The two earlier double portraits all date from 1634. And what's remarkable about having now Eijk in the collection as well is she is the bridge between those two periods, painted in 1632. So it's really, if you want to understand early Rembrandt, come to Boston because you have an extraordinary opportunity to do so. I should also mention that of these 6 portraits, 4 of 6 paintings, 4 of them are gifts. And that is a theme for the MFA Boston. We're not necessarily rich in acquisition funds, but we're extraordinarily rich in our supporters. I just wanted to digress for 1 second to talk a little bit about when I first met Eijk and Rosemary van Otterloo. It was in 1993, which is exactly 100 years after the first Rembrandt entered the MFA's collection. Eijk came into the conservation studio. As George said, I was a very young, newly minted conservator at that point. He was probably carrying this painting under his arm, which I probably disapproved of, but didn't say anything. He came into the conservation studio with Peter Sutton because this painting had, I don't know if you had it in the overhead bin, Eijk, but it had arrived with, had a little problem with some packing tape stuck to the surface, and he was looking for some help. But when I met Eijk, he introduced himself to me, I think perhaps because this is what Peter had told him, as a new collector of Dutch art because he had just acquired his second painting. Perhaps when you only have one painting, you're not a collector, but when you have 2, you are. That was over 30 years ago. I feel extraordinarily lucky to have been at the MFA during the assembling of what is an absolutely extraordinary collection. And in fact, 2 collections. As you heard from Matt, he and Susan had already started working on their collection. And if there's one thing that it really brought home to me listening to people talk today, it's something that Rosemary actually said in the conservation studio not that long ago when our director asked the Van Otterloos, what's one of the most important things about assembling a collection like this? And without missing a beat, Rosemary said, discipline. Because you can get distracted by a lot of beautiful things, but boy, have they stayed focused. And it is extraordinary what has happened in the last few years. I had to include the image on the right. This is more recently, this is just in the last couple of years. Eijk in the Rosemary and Eijk van Otterloo Conservation Studio, explaining to our director some of the finer points of a conservation treatment that he had actually undertaken. It was kind of if you are committed to understanding issues of condition and quality and really understanding what conservation can teach you, then in some ways it's a natural progression to perhaps want, on a rare occasion, to understand what conservators do in real time. And Eijk has spent some time with me in the studio over the last few years. And he's really quite gifted as a conservator. I think maybe, and you should take this under consideration, Matt, if you look at paintings for 40 years, you could actually, bring those skills to a very effective ends. Anyway, it's been extraordinary to be part of this journey. And just quickly to talk a little bit about what we do in conservation at the MFA in relation to Dutch paintings, I thought I really wanted to say that we will take a look at our wonderful artists in the studio, but also that it's not one person or one discipline. It's everybody coming together. That's part of, for me, the genius of the situation we find ourselves in because of the generosity of these donors. They have trusted us and given us just such an extraordinary collection of paintings, but we can now bring them together in the Conservation Centre with conservation and scientific research expertise, with our curatorial colleagues, with the focus and the resources of the Centre for Netherlandish Art to really do profound study, scholarship that's based on the objects. We come together to look at the artwork all the time, and it is the most rewarding experience that one can imagine. And it really does take a village. Just to give you a sense of what conservation brings to the table, because there's different expertise from different people, just a couple of details of looking closely at the artist in his studio. Just all this is our images under the microscope, but it really gives you an insight into the touch of the artist, the way he manipulates paint, the wonderful details that are hidden in this very tiny painting. Like even at the edge of the easel there that looms over the young artist, you can see he's taken the time not to draw the edge of the panel, but also you can see the ground layer, the material on the panel that's dripped round the sides and to the back of the painting, which is just, he didn't need to include that, but the observation is remarkable. I've always been fascinated by what Rembrandt chose to show us in this painting. It's really stripped down to the attributes of the artist. You have the brushes, you have the palette, you can see others hanging on the wall behind. You can see the grinding stone standing behind the artist, because of course at this time, the paints were being made in the artist's studio. So you were taking the powdered pigments and grinding them into the oil media to make the paints that the artist would work with. You can see just about in the background there some bottles that are probably holding the oils and the diluents, again, to make the paint possible. But what he doesn't show you is what he's painting, or even to give you a clue. You cannot actually see the colors on the palette he's holding, which might give you a clue to the type of painting he's making. So he's really refined it down to the very basic tools of the artist. And mainly what he shows you is the artist standing there contemplating, perhaps a little overwhelmed by what he's about to undertake. Technical examination is something that we bring to the table. Some of it's very simple. It's as simple as unframing the painting and looking at the back of it. Often there's information on the back of paintings and it can tell you something about what's happened to an artwork over the centuries. There are labels. You can tell sometimes if it's been cut down. You can see that by the edges of the painting that this picture is intact. There's a beveling that you're often going to look for. And then quickly, some of the other techniques that we can look at. The rather greenish image is a UV image, which gives us information about the surface, the coatings on the painting, the varnish layers. and can tell you, that you can sometimes see these dark spots or little bits of restoration on the surface. Then you have infrared, which lets you look a little bit below the surface. You can see some of the underpainting, some of the adjustments that Rembrandt's making. One of the things I'm intrigued by, even in this little early painting, there's lots of adjustments around the head and the hat of the artist standing in his studio. You see that again and again in Rembrandt. Almost always he's making these sorts of adjustments to his sitters. The profiles, the details matter. And then this is an X-ray, which shows you aspects of every layer of the painting, because obviously a painting is created in multiple layers, and so you can see the panel, you can see even the little nails, because there are little additional pieces of wood attached around the edges. It's a little difficult to read because there's a lead white layer on the surface. You can just about make out the easel. I think you can't see the figure of the artist at all. I think it's because Rembrandt reused this panel and covered something over before he painted this final painting. And we have new techniques coming to on use in the future, where perhaps this mystery will be revealed. But we've gone in to look closer at one painting. One of the things that the gift has allowed us to do, and this is one example, there are many across the collection now, where we can also pull out and look at a given painting in a different context. And the addition of the Jan Davids de Heem, again, in the Kimball version of the show. No one else got it, but you're lucky enough to be able to see these two paintings hanging next to each other in the galleries right now. I think it really elucidates both paintings, because you're looking at what is one artist choosing to show you and what is another artist choosing to show you, and what are they deciding not to show you. We talked a little bit about the Rembrandt. It's impossible to look at the De Heem and not think it's an answer to Rembrandt, that this painting wouldn't exist without the Rembrandt first. The room is almost identical. The raw floor, the sort of simple unfinished surface, the door at the right in both paintings, even the compositional elements of the easel in the middle of the room in the Rembrandt, and the easel, but also with the map falling off the wall, that triangular structure, they really speak to each other, but then they're profoundly different as well. There is actually no indication of the tools of the artist. What De Heem chooses to show you are the intellectual tools, right? The sculpture, the musical instrument, the carpet. Here you're seeing examples of drawings, prints, sources for inspiration. And he does allow you to see what he's painting at the early stages, perhaps a religious scene. What you don't see is his face. So it's really the opposite of what Rembrandt's showing. And again, in dialogue with each other, I think they really do elucidate each other. And then finally, I just wanted to mention, because it's the one thing I haven't spoken about, is we also obviously, as George mentioned, do conservation. And what I really wanted to mention here was, people often ask me, how do you decide in a collection of the scale of ours when things should be restored? And again, I can only say that this is a dialogue with the curatorial department. It's a joint decision. We have many different priorities, but at some point, once we've really studied a painting, we really understand it, we believe it doesn't really look the way the artist intended for you to be able to appreciate it, then perhaps we'll make a decision to clean it. And in this case, with the Ames portraits a few years ago, we made that decision. It's a little difficult to see, but they were quite yellowed, and particularly the portrait of the man had darkened and discolored restoration on it. So we went ahead and cleaned it, and we actually did part of the treatment in public to allow our visitors to follow along, to see the process of cleaning the painting, and to meet with me and ask me questions on occasion. And you see here just a little example of this is the cleaning line. So still yellowed varnish on the right-hand side, and you can see it perhaps more clearly in the UV image, and then the cleaned the cleaned part of the painting on the left-hand side. Really extraordinary painting, and I'm going to leave you just with one quick image of the paintings now cleaned, and one last image of what you see when you look closely at Rembrandt. And I'm going to really leave you with that. I just want to point out this is what we mean by materiality, understanding when you look closely and take your time, you can really see how he's working, the scratching into the surface of the paint. If I go back for 1 second, this is the area just down here. It's the description of the lace, and you can feel him manipulating the paint and using the different material qualities of the paint to create his illusion. And it's so loosely applied, but incredibly effective. These fluid, very quickly applied strokes of black, and then this deeply impastoed layers of the upper lace with that warm, milky white paint. It is actually in 3 dimensions, and you can, even if you don't necessarily see that when you first look at the painting, you can feel it when you're appreciating the painting, and it really, for me, underscores the skill of Rembrandt. Thank you.
Thank you, Rona. It gives me great pleasure for our last talk of the morning to introduce Chris Atkins, who is the director of he is the Van Otterloo Weatherbie director of the Center for Netherlandish Art, a center established by the Van Otterloos and the Weatherbies as part of the donation of their collections, the promised gifts and the actual gifts of the collection. It has made an enormous, well, for one thing, it kicked a whole bunch of people out of their offices for the forming of a really beautiful center, which is well worth the work. And you're going to see photographs of the center in just a minute. I would also like to say that I've known Chris since he came to work at the MFA when I was department head as a research assistant, and have followed his career from the finishing of his dissertation on Franz Hals to his career as a curator at Philadelphia, at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and now as when he was tapped to be the head of the Center for Netherlandish Art. So welcome, Chris Atkins.
Thanks, George. Indeed, we're talking about lots of old friends in all sorts of ways today. But first, thanks so much, George, for all your hospitality and everything here. Also, all the wonderful colleagues at the Kimball, Erik, Rebecca, Nancy, but also all the conservators, registrars, educators, marketers, everyone who has made such an amazing exhibition come to life, and Gabe, who's running our AV behind the scenes today. And indeed, going to talk today about the Center for Netherlandish Art, or CNA, which we've talked about on a number of occasions. It was part of the transformative gift. So we've talked about the works of art themselves, but part of the transformative gift was also the initial endowment funds to establish the CNA. And this is really part of the, if I may say, the genius behind not only the generosity, but the vision behind the gifts of creating a center that could activate the collections and think about the future as well. So what I want to do today is briefly introduce you to what the CNA is, what we do, and give you a little taste of where we're going. So it's a couple of key timeline points. So in 2017, the additional endowment funds were created or given alongside the gifts. I began in August of 2019. I just hit my 5-year anniversary. And then we officially launched in fall of 21. In this past fall, we've launched or kicked off our 3rd full academic year. So we're very much a new initiative, one that's beginning to take legs, and happy to share some things here with you. Our mission is to promote the study and the appreciation of Dutch and Flemish art. The exhibition here is about Dutch art, but we also focus on Flemish art, which is the Dutch-speaking area of Belgium. And we'll get into those 2 parts of study and appreciation. And the vision is really manifold. to be a leader, to be an international leader, and to think about quality and excellence, two words which, of course, central to the Kimball here as well. But I also want to stress the sustained commitment. This is not a fleeting passing initiative. This is not a 3-year project. This is a permanent initiative to focus on this study and the appreciation of this material which we hold so dear. Our approach is through works of art. We've talked about the works of art, but this is also what distinguishes and differentiates us from a university research institute. We have direct access to the amazing works of art in the care of the Museum of Fine Arts, and we really want to privilege that and focus on object-based study, thinking about how the works of art themselves can promote questions, studies, and opportunities which can help us better understand our past as well as perhaps our present. As part of this, we have a research library, which in part, also part of the gift, was the personal library of the late art historian Egbert Haverkamp Begeman from Yale University and later at the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU. And so he had a collection of about 25,000 volumes, which includes, yes, let that number sink in, 25,000 volumes, about 300 rare books, and we've melded that with the relevant collections within the MFA. Here you see but part of our facility. There's also compact shelving if you're wondering how we get actually a total of close to 45,000 volumes into the collection. We've talked a lot about the past today, but the CNA is about the present and even more so about the future. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to do a number of things, and we're pretty ambitious. We're trying to create a learning community, a place where people can come who have a shared interest but can develop their study, can develop their experiences, and really with an eye towards the future. How can we think about what can we do to help universities, to help colleges around the world prepare the future generations, scholars, curators, conservators, but also what can we do to help create new audiences? How can we introduce people who don't yet know that they love this material? How can we help them find entry points into those activities? And then also want to really stress, and I'll go through some examples, how we're working this, we're envisioning this as a collaborative initiative. Thinking how can we work with partners, how can we collaborate to really make an impact going forward. So one of our key aspects is we run a residency fellowship program. These are two on the far left and far right, our first two cohorts, where we already have welcomed Americans, Canadians, Belgians, Dutch, even an individual of Brazil who did his PhD in Pisa in Italy. So every year we welcome up to three pre or postdoctoral fellows to be in residence at the CNA where they conduct independent research. We've also added the Hans Brenninkmeijer Visiting Senior Fellowship, where we invite for an individual for up to 8 weeks to come and study and present their research at the CNA. So I really want to stress the independent research project. So they come with ideas. They come with the things they want to study. And this activates the collection, but it also injects new ideas, new energy, and we as staff also can learn from them with the things that they bring into the activities. And also want to stress in our central image, they're not just doing their research in the books, but how can we find ways for them to share their research? This is Braden Scott, who completed his dissertation at McGill University in Montreal, sharing some of his research on Peter Paul Rubens with a range of audiences in our galleries. We also partner on a biennial summer institute, which is run in partnership with the Harvard Art Museums and partners in the Netherlands, the Rijksmuseum and the National Institute for Art History in The Hague. This opportunity we help provide is for emerging professionals, advanced graduate students, recent professionals. We had some in our initial iteration, even an emerging curator from Croatia. He spent 1 week in the Netherlands and 1 week in Boston, learning collections, networking, creating opportunities that can help advance that career. And indeed, in our first iteration, we had 16 students from 9 different countries. If we have any students or aspiring individuals in the audience, we'll have our next post. We'll be running our next iteration this coming summer, and applications will go live later this year. But really returning core to all of these activities in them, but also in the individual classes, is object-based study. You can, of course, have amazing opportunities to see things on the walls in the galleries, but we also find opportunities to bring the objects into the center itself so that they can study and look closely and learn really about those material components that Rona was talking so much about. Here I show you a couple of different images from a course. So we welcome individual class visits. This was a graduate course at Boston University that met entirely in the center, looking and learning deeply about the collection. And then we even had the opportunity, we took them to the Netherlands to extend their visit. Looking at collections, this was on the opportunity of the Great Vermeer exhibition in the Rijksmuseum, but also, as you see on your right, with one of the curators, providing networking opportunities, because it's about the objects, but it's also, as I think you're beginning to get from my presentation, it's also really about the people. One of our other key programs, which I'm very excited about, is our Gallery for Innovative Scholarship. Within our suite of galleries in Boston, we dedicated one gallery to a CNA programming, where we create every year we present a small-scale exhibition. But these exhibitions are a little bit different than the normal exhibition in that they're done in partnership. This was our first iteration, which you see the professor, Jeffrey Muller from Brown University, and a group of graduate students who created the first exhibition in the United States devoted to Michelino Woutier. A single-room exhibition where we open up the collection, we ask our partners what do they want to see, what do they want to say, and then we provide the opportunity. What often happens in university training programs is a curatorial training is a thought exercise. You create a PowerPoint or maybe a design on paper, but we're giving real, tangible, real-world opportunities to actually create an exhibition. You might be asking, what do we get out of it? Well, we get the opportunity to have new ideas. We have opportunities where we share our expertise, but it's also about giving others the opportunity to learn, to do research, and then share their research with other audiences, what I like to call public-facing scholarship. Our second iteration, which is up currently, was with Yale University, an exhibition called Thinking Small. Here you see them. This was with Professor Marissa Bass there in the middle, and some of her graduates. This had 4 graduate students and 1 undergraduate. We also published a digital brochure or catalog that accompanies these CNA studies, and I'm excited that the exhibition that will be going up in September. I skipped a level, going from graduate students, worked with 6 teenagers from Boston public high schools, where we did the same project. What did they see? Thinking about the future generations, what did students, what did teenagers, what did they see? What did they find exciting? And what did they want to share with other audiences? So if you come to Boston after December, you can see that. I also want to, by way of introduction, we do a range of things. Antine is co-curating this amazing exhibition devoted to the late 17th, early 18th century painter Rachael Rausch, that will be opening in the Alte Pinakothek in Munich very soon at the end of the month, before traveling to Toledo and then being on view in Boston a year from now, actually a little bit earlier, early fall 25. But as part of that, the CNA coordinates and leads a multi-institutional research project. Across our institutions, in collaboration internally with conservation and scientific research, Rona and her team, curatorially with Antine, we're working with colleagues in Munich at the Derner Institute and the Alte Pinakothek, the Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge University, UK, and colleagues at Toledo to better understand how Rausch painted her pictures. I'm really excited about this opportunity because it shares a number of things. Here you see all the people on my Zoom screen. We meet once a month on Zoom. There are some things we learned during the pandemic that did give us some benefits. And on the left, one of our research fellows, Kirsten Derricks, who is conducting individual research. Most of the time, these types of research projects that are large, that are looking beyond what a single individual institution can create, are restricted to Rembrandt, Cranach, Van Eyck. And what we're able to do here is devote to a late 17th, early 18th century painter, a floral still life painter, and of course a woman artist. And what can we learn when we all get all the results together of about 20 objects? We'll be sharing the results of that in a dedicated research project. Journal, I should say, a special journal issue. So this begins to get at and epitomizes some of the things that we're looking at objects, object-based study, interdisciplinarity, and international collaboration. And we have, through our variety of programs, these are but some of the partners that we've been working with that really epitomize what we're trying to do, to be collaborative, to be enmeshed within the larger art and art historical ecosystem, all with an effort to create an impact that advances our mission, which is the study and the appreciation of Dutch and Flemish art in Boston, but also and beyond. And so that's why I'm super excited for this program, with Dutch Art in a Global Age, and our future iteration, that we can count the Kimball Museum as a partner in our work. Thank you, George.
So I think you all can see how exciting this project has been for the Kimball Art Museum, because it goes so far beyond just an exhibition that is on the walls. There's such a richness to the shared experiences that we have all had as a result of working on this exhibition together, and it really is. I mean, it's such a rewarding project. There's one thing that I'd like to say to you, and that is how much there is to learn in this exhibition. If I left you with I'm not going to leave you yet, but if you leave this room with a piece of advice, it is come back and read every label in this exhibition. It will not be a waste of your time. You will not be bored, and you will leave that project. It might take you 2 or 3 visits, but you'll leave that project understanding something about Dutch art in the 17th century and about the history of the world in the 17th century that you didn't know before. So I think it really is an enormously enriching experience having this exhibition here in Fort Worth for the next several months. So we've got a nice bit of time before we try to end up at noon for questions from you. So if Gabe, if you bring the lights up in the audience, and Rebecca and Connie are on either side, and if you've got a question, raise your hand and let me call on you, and they'll pass you the mic so that we can record your question as we're recording this whole session to be on YouTube, on the Kimball's YouTube channel in the future. So if you've got a question, just raise your hand and let me know. There's one way in the back. Is it on now? Gabe, I think the mic, it may need to be turned on.
Yeah, just click that switch in there.
Yeah, now we got it.
One thing I find really exciting is you guys seem to have come together and created this family that is a family because you share a passion. I think that's so cool. So I wonder, I find the whole idea of authenticity fascinating. I read a lot, there's always the cunning and dastardly art forger, and obviously all of you have some contribution to how do you know painting is a real representative of its age and message.
Who wants to tackle that? Rona, do you want to start with it? But there's a strong technical aspect to this.
I can start, but then, as I do in real life, then I'll hand it off to my colleagues. Technical examination can definitely bring some new information to the table, and often that authenticity is something that we're asked to look at, as are questions of condition versus quality, things like that. What I would say with authenticity is what we can mostly do in technical examination is the things that we can prove are usually what's not right. We can never prove that something is right. We can find materials that weren't invented until after the artist died. That's a pretty conclusive. But even then, it can get a little squirrely, but that's pretty conclusive. Beyond that, a little bit like some of the images that I showed you today, we can just look really closely and really try to get a sense of the signature of the artist, how they paint, and bring that to the table. But then, truly, for the most difficult decisions, it really comes back to connoisseurship and the knowledge of the curatorial department. So it is a conversation, it is a coming together, and then interpreting information, technical information, but also art historical information.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. Well, connoisseurship is about looking, but it's also about doing research. So Chris alluded to the work we've been doing on Rachel Rausch, and in most of the cases, somebody else has done the work for you. So Frans Hals, for example, has been cataloged, and Seymour Slive, a professor at Harvard, spent his lifetime doing it. So if we encounter what we think is a Hals, we say, okay, what did Slive say, right? And then based on what Slive said, you can do your own work, and you might compare it to a period, you might look at the signature, you might look at the brushwork, you know, how accomplished is it? The case of Rausch, there is no Slive. So when we assembled her oeuvre, which is about 150 pictures, and what you actually put in an exhibition, you first of all have to go see the paintings, and then you look for, as Rona said, for signature, how typical is it? And sometimes something looks really good in a picture, and then you see it in person, and you say, okay, no, this is not quite good enough. And you start noticing things like, she often puts ants in a wide rows, and if the ants don't really crawl into the flower, you feel like this is not, you know, convincing, and then, you know, you demote. We wouldn't demote it, but we would say, okay, let's not include it. So you, and then you also talk to people. So TEFAF is a place where, you know, you ask your colleagues as well. So you have to be humble and not think you know everything, because there's always more to learn.
Take my own mic. I can talk about an anecdote, that anecdotal evidence of authenticity. It's a great question. Thank you. We had acquired a Gerrit van Honthorst, and Gerrit van Honthorst shows a woman and a man playing musical instruments, and they're hanging more or less out of a window. And this painting was in the catalog raisonné of the artist, and it showed a black and white photo of this painting, indicating that it was in the Musée des Beaux-Arts of Lyon. So that was an interesting piece of information. So maybe the artist had made two versions of the same subject. They really looked identical. When Rona Macbeth examined the painting very closely, she said that she called me up one day and said there is a dark stripe at the top of the painting, and we can't quite understand why it's there, because it doesn't really make sense for a window to have that. And she asked if on the side of the canvas, could she go under this stripe and see what is there. And with a scalpel, she removed a little bit of the stripe without hurting the painting. And she said, there is paint underneath, and that seems to be the original plan of the artist. Would you allow me to remove the stripe, this dark stripe? And in the following months, they removed the stripe with a scalpel, bit by bit. Took very long time, and it's very tedious work, I assure you, because I've tried it under her tutelage. And this made the painting, when the stripe was removed, it made the painting, it made it complete, and everything started to make very much sense. So there was contact made with the museum in Lyon, and said, we have do you have the same stripe that we had? And yes, they have the same stripe. Well, we suggest you look underneath and see what is there. Well, obviously there was nothing there, because this was Lyon has the copy, we have the real McCoy.
this kind of research can go on, and it's really it's very, very exciting when it happens. Another question, I'm sure there's one. Yes?
Just to stay on the thread of conservation, which to me is very interesting, I'm loosely related to the Meadows Museum in Dallas, and a lot of our exhibitions come to us by way of Kimball Museum, because you have a conservation program. Swoop Around was an exhibition we had, and Dali as well. And so it seems to me like there is that kind of flow here in the art world of Texas, North Texas. Is that true in the Boston area or throughout the country in the case of the NFA, or am I explaining it correctly, the question? I'm looking at what causes the flow of exhibits that might come to the United States, some of them from Europe, to be analyzed and restored or conserved, and then because they're here in our country, then they go around. Is that something you see a lot of, or?
Let me jump in for just a second to tout the genius of our conservation department here. It's mostly paintings conservation, though we can engage in other kinds of conservation with bringing in outside experts. But we've had one of the best conservation programs in the world here for the past 40 years, which is really an extraordinary thing for such a small museum. And if you look at the people, there's actually on YouTube a wonderful panel just like this one about the history of conservation, past, present, and future at the MFA. And you see the number of heads of departments at major international conservation departments who got their start here, first time job here at the Kimball Art Museum, which is pretty impressive. But yes, I think like the Kimball, the MFA Boston is a place where the art historians believe in conservation and the study of works of art with conservators as being one of the most enriching things you can possibly do. So I'll pass it off to you guys to extend.
Sure, and I can say just a quick word. If I understand the question correctly, it's museum conservation is actually a remarkably small field, really, worldwide. So we do tend to all know each other. And so there's a lot of collaboration that goes on. And then I would also say that things will come to Boston because of that it's known there's a particular interest in, for example, Dutch and Flemish art, and also an appreciation of the curatorial team here. So sometimes things come not necessarily for conservation, but for examination, to be understood, to be studied, and again that bringing together of the different expertise, what we can do in conservation and scientific research, along with our colleagues, can then when we bring that information together, we can understand the artwork better. As far as actually doing conservation treatments, I think that those go in all directions. There are experts all over the world. It really depends what the artwork is and who's involved with the project.
Guys, there's a lot of questions. We'll get to you. I promise we'll get to you. So, yeah, Todd.
I was wondering whether Mr. Weatherbie or Mr. Van Allen would have a favorite painting in that collection, and if so, why?
I'll take a shot at that, and then I pass the baton to Eijk. The answer is no. We have, in our collection, we're fortunate to have almost 40 paintings, and they are all our children. We love all of them. Not all, but not all at the same time in equal measure. But the answer is not in our case.
My answer is similar. It starts with a no. There's no. The way I look at the art world is to look at each artist and ask the question: what is his complete oeuvre, what are the and like every person or every personal experience, you have A experiences, B experiences, and C experiences, and that happens to artists as well. Some of their paintings are Monday morning paintings. They're not. They show a little hangover. But what in our collection, what we're trying to achieve is to collect works that rank in the top 10% of their oeuvre, and then the question of what is your favorite is completely irrelevant.
There's a gentleman in the fourth row in the middle, just there. Raise your hand high, Miss Sir. Yeah, there you go.
So first of all, I want to thank you. I mean, this was truly amazing how each of you had something to say from a different frame of reference. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. You had several things that you said. I had a couple of questions. One, these are the orange or the lemon, and the circular curving. How you could say there was a left hand and also a right hand. And I noticed that in many of the still lifes you see a lemon or an orange. Is that something very difficult to pull off and make it look real? Is that why you see that over and over again?
I understand the question, but I really don't know how to answer it. I don't know why the same props are used over and over again by artists. Maybe it does have something to do with demonstrating the skill of your brushwork. I think that painting a glass, if you know how to do it, becomes it's a relatively easy object to paint. However, an orange or a lemon or a lime, there's so much texture it really takes extraordinary skill to make it look real. And not something that looks almost real. It's fantastic how these artists get it right, and it's not easy.
I could say something to that. There's an article by an art historian who's now the director of the Guggenheim Museum. She's trained actually as a Dutch art historian, Mariette Westerman, and she wrote an article called "The Lure of the Lemon." And it's really great. She looks at when did it start, when did the Dutch put it there, and then she even goes up to Matisse. But Matisse, she says, actually doesn't peel the lemon. He leaves it whole. So it seems to be some motif that artists were fascinated by. And I think actually if you go through the exhibition, and I know very impressed by the younger children who are here, you can actually go look and count the dogs that are in the paintings. We have a number of dogs. Some are really small, some are big. You can look at butterflies, but you can also look for lemons. And I showed you a calf who actually is not as detailed in his execution as Heda, but he also peels it. And so the Dutch really don't leave the lemon whole. They like this idea of the spiraling lemon, and some cut it in half, and others, to sort of show the interior, and they put a little, is it a pith? A bit? Yeah. Pith?
Seeds.
Seeds. So I think it's really to show off. And you asked the question, well, how can you tell the difference between Heda and Claes? They're showing off, and they're trying to sort of capture the eye of the buyer.
Great. Front row here.
Well, our boys that have enthusiastically come over here to hear this have a question, and I have one. Their question is, does Garrett Dow's dog have a name?
Does Garrett Dow's dog have a name? I think we should have a contest for the Kimball Art Museum on Instagram to name this dog. I think the answer is, alas, he does not yet.
There you go. The Van Otterloos and Weatherbie's have done an extraordinary thing in assembling this collection in a relatively short period of time. I'm curious, George, if you were going to go and look at other extraordinary collections of Dutch art at museums in the United States, what would be the top 4 or 5 collections that would be peer collections?
You know, they're so different in their shapes and forms. You can certainly say that people like Henry Clay Frick had an eye for some really great Dutch paintings, but he was really only interested in, you know, Rembrandt and Vermeer. I mean, nobody is not interested in Rembrandt and Vermeer. You have artists, collectors like the Havemeyers, who bought extraordinary Rembrandts along with their Monets and Degas. And then you have people like at the Wideners at the National Gallery of Art. What's really interesting to me about the Van Otterloo and Weatherbie collections, which distinguishes them from these sort of turn-of-the-century robber baron collections. They're barons, but neither one of these gentlemen is robbers. The dealers may tell you otherwise, but they're interested in artists of every type and of every level of renown. Just take, for example, the 2 paintings that Matthew talked about earlier this morning. Frans Hals, one of the most famous artists in history, period, and certainly one of the 2 or 3 most famous Dutch painters, but also Adrian van der Velde, sort of not famous at all. And what these folks, these 4 individuals are interested in is the individual quality of the work of art and not the renown of the name that attaches to it. And I think that's a real distinction. And it's a real connoisseur's effort to buy works by artists at every level of renown, as long as the work of art is really spectacular. And I think that's really a distinction of this collection as opposed to others that were formed in the Gilded Age, let's say. A big difference.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
The other thing, as Rona suggests, tastes change. And so those collections that were formed in the late 19th and 20th century were based on the understanding of Dutch art at that time. And as research continues and tastes change as well, by a recently formed collection, we have a different flavor that differs from some of those earlier ones as well.
And you saw a photograph of Egbert Begeman there, who was a legendary, Dutch-born legendary professor in American universities. And the number of PhD dissertations that were directed by Egbert Begeman that had resulted in catalog raisonnés, that's the complete scientific catalog of an artist's work. The number of catalog raisonnés that come out of students of Egbert Begeman has advanced history, and in the course literally since the 1970s, one after another artist has sort of suddenly had a work, an oeuvre defined by these, in most cases, American students of these professors, these several professors working in American universities. And it really has changed the field, changed the story, and changed our understanding of Dutch art. And think of what's going to happen in the 21st century with institutions like the Center for Netherlandish Art. The CNA is going to change the way, it's going to broaden and complicate our understanding. Already you can see in a show like this, the things that this exhibition investigates are totally different from how it would have been 20 years ago. Completely different set of expectations and questions being asked. And I think that's something that has to do with the progress of time and questions of why are we here? You know, I think that's one of the great things that this exhibition poses, is that it's about a global age. 20 years ago, this show would have been Dutch art of the golden age. Well, the golden age it's golden for who? Is the question. And this is about Dutch art in a global age, which is an age in which we're still living in. When we think of I think it was one of our docents yesterday said, you know, you think of just starting your car and how global your car is, how global your telephone is, because it's not only that it might have been made on the other end of the world, but it also contains things that come from all over the world. And the Dutch in the 17th century were the first people to bring things from quite so many places all together at once, and to make a world that was just different, but is the world that we live in now. There are bound to be some other questions on this other side. Anybody? Yeah.
Hello. Thank you all so much for all the great information that y'all shared today. I have a question for Christopher and any other ones who want to share. I want to be a curator in the future, and I'm curatorial assistant now, next door at the Eijk, and I'm applying for grad school as well. I'm the Center for Netherlandish Art, and what y'all do really intrigued me. I'm personally not going to go into Netherlandish Art, but I would love to know if the MFA Boston has centers for other areas, or like in and around Boston, Northeast, that y'all would know, because all that y'all do is very intriguing to me as a student.
Thank you for that interesting question. We do not. This is a unique initiative, not only at the MFA, but certainly on this side of the Atlantic. There's nothing like it. There are a few other resources that might be of interest to you. One that we do through the CNA, we do Dutch and Flemish art, but there might be some things. We do online program, we call it CNA Student Sessions. It's by students for students. It's an online, we invite, it's run by 2 students. We rotate them every year, and they identify somebody who can come in on a virtual screen and talk about their experiences. We actively bar people who are established professionals so that they don't ask that really complicated question that embarrasses the others, so they can't ask others. But there are other resources, like the Association of Art Museum Curators runs a summer program that you might be interested in, but there are also a range of other fellowships that might be available to you. But George, you might have some other thoughts.
I would also say that, I mean, things like the CNA are getting started at other institutions. We mentioned the Meadows Museum in Dallas, where the new Custard Institute is going to have, has programs for people at every level, from undergraduates all the way to graduate students, and a director of the center and professorships, and this is all at SMU. So I have a feeling that things like this are going to happen, because I think they're more exciting. And of course, you could change your field. There's a lot to be discovered in Netherlandish art, and you don't have to stick to Holland. You can go to Flanders too. So, and I think it doesn't have to be 17th century or 18th century. It can be later.
Yeah, and if you're interested in our fellowship application, our new round just went live yesterday, I think, actually. But so people who are interested across disciplines, but also who might find a resonance, someone who's looking at 19th or American art, 19th, 20th century art that is in so many ways related to some of these things that are happening earlier. Those are certainly projects that we're also interested in. So indeed, but yes, thank you, George, for pushing the, one can choose a variety of fields, including this one.
And some of the people, like some of the curators at the MFA who were working on Rembrandt, were also working on Dutch Art Nouveau. So there's a wide range of thinking on various subjects. There's one question just there, Connie. Do you see a lady with her hand up, about 8 rows back?
Thanks, George.
Yeah. Oh, so Kelly. Yeah.
That's me.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
No problem.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you guys so much for this incredibly enriching panel. And I wanted to kind of add to the scholarship that, just to kind of do a little marketing plug for this. I'm an art historian and marketing professional at the Modern Museum of Fort Worth, and have worked a little bit at the Kimball as well. And not only did this panel enrich me and the exhibition, but I want to do a little plug for the incredible catalog. So I interviewed George for a video production company, Art this Week here in Fort Worth, and on this exhibition, and studied the catalog a lot in that preparation. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit, you know, this is mainly a comment more than a question, but this progressive nature of how this exhibition is a global age, Chris's wonderful introductory essay and that catalog about that. And then also, I have Brazilian background and did not know that the Dutch were in Brazil for a brief period, about 20 years. And there is a landscape portrait in this exhibition, The Landscape in the Ruins of Olinda, that also has a great essay by Mary Hicks from the catalog on it. And that was just incredibly, you know, interesting to learn about. So I just appreciate y'all's scholarship on this and just commend you for the great efforts.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you all. It's now noon and probably time for us all to get up and have a drink of water or something like that, go have some lunch. I can't thank every one of you in the audience for coming today. I want to thank all of our panelists for attending, and I urge you, if you haven't gone upstairs already to see the exhibition, it's open. And if you're not a member, you can't go in, but this is a good time to become a member of the Kimball Art Museum. So have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.